The email notification chimed on my phone at 2:47 a.m. I probably should have ignored it, rolled over, and dealt with whatever it was in the morning. Instead, I squinted at the screen and opened what would become the message that changed everything. It was from Meadowbrook Photography Studio's automated gallery system, and the subject line read, "Your family portrait session, gallery now available." But here's the thing, I wasn't supposed to be getting this email, because according to my mother, I wasn't part of the family anymore. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The whole mess started 3 months earlier when my younger sister Brittany announced her engagement to some guy named Derek she'd been dating for exactly 4 months. Mom went absolutely nuclear with excitement, immediately diving into wedding planning mode like she was orchestrating a royal coronation instead of a basic backyard ceremony. "We need new family portraits," Mom declared over dinner one Tuesday night, stabbing her fork into her Caesar salad with unnecessary force. "Something elegant for the engagement announcement cards. The old ones are from when Marcus was still in high school, and frankly, they're embarrassing." I looked up from my pasta. "What's wrong with the old portraits?" "You had that awful buzz cut, and Brittany still had braces. We need something current, something that shows we're a successful, put-together family." She paused, eyeing me critically. "Though I suppose you'll need to do something about your appearance first." My appearance, right. Ever since I'd started my freelance graphic design business 2 years ago, I'd let my hair grow out and gotten a few visible tattoos. Nothing crazy, just some geometric designs on my forearms and a small piece behind my ear. But to Mom, I might as well have joined a motorcycle gang. "I think Marcus looks fine," Dad said quietly, not looking up from his phone. "Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Fine doesn't photograph well. We need to be polished. We need something presentable." Mom's voice had that edge it got when she was gearing up for a lecture. "This is about Brittany's future, Marcus. Derek comes from a very traditional family, very conservative. They have certain expectations." Brittany finally spoke up. "Mom, it's just a family photo. Derek's parents aren't going to judge our entire family based on Marcus's haircut." "You'd be surprised what people notice," Mom replied, already scrolling through her phone. "I'm booking us with Meadowbrook Photography. They did the Henderson family portraits last year, and they looked absolutely stunning. The session is this Saturday at 2 o'clock." She looked directly at me. "And Marcus, you're getting a haircut and covering up those decorations on your arms. We're presenting as a respectable family." The word respectable hit like a slap. I set down my fork, suddenly not hungry anymore. "Those decorations are tattoos, Mom. They're part of who I am." "Well, they're not part of who we are as a family, not for this portrait." The argument that followed was epic, even by our family's standards. I refused to cut my hair or hide my tattoos. Mom refused to compromise the family's image. Dad tried to play peacekeeper, but eventually gave up and retreated to his workshop in the garage. Brittany sat there looking increasingly uncomfortable as her engagement announcement became the catalyst for World War III. Finally, I stood up. "You know what? Do the portrait without me. If I'm such an embarrassment to the family image, just pretend you only have one kid." "Don't be so dramatic," Mom snapped. "This is about presenting ourselves properly." "No, this is about you being ashamed of me, and honestly, I'm getting pretty tired of it." I walked out and didn't speak to any of them for 2 weeks. During that time, my phone buzzed constantly with texts from Brittany begging me to just apologize and go along with Mom's plans. Dad sent a few awkward messages about keeping the peace. Mom sent nothing at all. Finally, Brittany showed up at my apartment on a Thursday night with Thai food and tears in her eyes. "Please just come to the photo session," she begged, unpacking pad Thai containers on my kitchen counter. "I've been dreading my own engagement announcement because you and Mom are at war. This was supposed to be a happy time." I felt like garbage. None of this was Brittany's fault, and she was caught in the middle of Mom's control issues and my stubbornness. Fine, I said, grabbing chopsticks from my drawer. But I'm not cutting my hair, and I'm not covering my tattoos. Thank you, she said, relief flooding her voice. I'll talk to Mom. Maybe she'll compromise. She didn't compromise. When I showed up to Meadowbrook Photography Studio that Saturday afternoon, Mom took one look at me and her jaw tightened like a steel trap. I thought we discussed this, she said through gritted teeth. We discussed it. I disagreed. Here I am anyway. The photographer, a middle-aged woman named Linda Chen, emerged from the back of the studio carrying lighting equipment. She had kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. You must be the Richardson family. I'm so excited to work with you today. There's been a change of plans, Mom announced without missing a beat. We'll be doing a portrait of 4 instead of 5. My son has other commitments today. I stared at her. I'm literally standing right here. Are you sure? Linda asked, looking confused. I have the booking for 5 people, and I've set up the lighting accordingly. 4 will be perfect, Mom said firmly. Marcus was just leaving. The studio went dead silent, except for the humming of the air conditioning. Dad looked at his shoes. Brittany's mouth fell open. Derek, who I'd met exactly twice before, shifted uncomfortably and studied a framed portrait on the wall like it contained the secrets of the universe. Mom, Brittany whispered, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. We discussed what was expected for this portrait. Marcus chose not to meet those expectations. Actions have consequences. Linda looked between all of us, clearly sensing the family drama, but unsure how to navigate it. Maybe we could take some photos with 5 people and some with 4? Give you options? 4, Mom repeated. Just 4. I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. This wasn't about hair or tattoos anymore. This was about power, about Mom drawing a line in the sand and forcing everyone to pick a side. Fine, I said, my voice steady despite the fact that my hands were shaking. Enjoy your perfect family portrait. I walked out of that studio and sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Through the large front windows, I could see them arranging themselves for the shoot. Mom in the center, Dad on one side, Brittany and Derek on the other. A neat little family unit with no complications, no tattoos, no evidence that their eldest son even existed. That night, Brittany called me crying. I tried to stop her. I told her it was insane, but she said the photos were already paid for and we should just get it done. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never wanted any of this. It's not your fault, I told her, staring at the ceiling of my darkened bedroom. Mom made her choice pretty clear. What I didn't tell Brittany was that I'd already made a choice of my own. While sitting in that parking lot, watching my family pose for their portrait like I'd never existed, I'd opened my laptop and done some research on Meadowbrook Photography Studio. Linda Chen wasn't just the photographer, she was the owner, and according to the business records were all public information. Meadowbrook Photography Studio had been operating for 12 years, with Linda Chen as the sole proprietor. Annual revenue averaged around $180,000, respectable for a boutique studio, but nothing spectacular. More importantly, she'd been trying to sell for the past 8 months. The listing wasn't advertised wide, just a quiet posting on a commercial real estate website and a mention in the local business journal. Asking price $320,000 for the business, equipment, client list, and the building itself. The building was the real prize, a converted Victorian house in the historic Arts District with soaring ceilings, original hardwood floors, and those massive windows that made it perfect for natural light photography. I'd always been good with numbers, and my graphic design business had been more successful than I'd let on to my family. Turns out, when you don't have to spend money impressing people who are never going to approve of you anyway, you can save quite a bit. Plus, I'd been smart with investments, putting money into index funds and a few tech stocks that have performed well over the past few years. $320,000 was definitely more than I had liquid, but it wasn't impossible, especially if Linda was motivated to sell. The next Monday, I called the number on the listing and scheduled a meeting under the pretense of being an interested buyer, which technically I was. Linda met me at the studio that Wednesday afternoon, and I could immediately see why she wanted to sell. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond just being tired. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of someone who'd been carrying too much for too long. "Business has been good," she said, leading me through the main shooting area, "but I'm getting older, and the physical demands of this job are starting to wear on me. All the heavy equipment, the long hours on my feet, the weekend shoots. My daughter lives in Portland now, and I'd like to be closer to her and my grandchildren." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. She showed me the equipment room, filled with thousands of dollars worth of lighting, cameras, backdrops, and props. The editing suite had top-of-the-line computers and software. The client consultation room was warm and inviting, with comfortable chairs and walls lined with sample portraits. "The client base is solid," Linda continued, pulling out a binder filled with testimonials and booking records. "About 60% repeat customers, 40% referrals. I rarely have to advertise. Most of my business comes from word of mouth." I flipped through the testimonials, recognizing several local family names. The Hendersons, Mom had mentioned the Kellys from Dad's golf club, the Washingtons who lived in the fancy neighborhood across town. All gushing about Linda's professionalism, her ability to capture authentic moments, her patience with difficult subjects. "The seasonal patterns are predictable," she went on. "Big rush for family portraits around the holidays, graduation photos in spring, wedding season in summer. I book engagement shoots year-round, and I've started doing more corporate headshots as the downtown area has grown." She paused, studying me with those perceptive eyes I remembered from the disastrous family session. "Can I ask what draws you to photography as a business?" I'd prepared for this question. "I'm a graphic designer currently, but I've always been interested in expanding into photography. I like the idea of capturing moments for families, helping them preserve memories." The words felt strange in my mouth, but they weren't entirely untrue. "It's rewarding work," Linda said, her expression softening. "Though I'll warn you, dealing with family dynamics can be challenging. You'll see people at their most vulnerable, and sometimes their most difficult." Something in her tone made me think she remembered our family session, though she was too professional to mention it directly. We talked about numbers. The $320,000 included everything: the building, all equipment, the established client relationships, and Linda's agreement to stay on for a month to help with the transition. She'd also provide referrals to freelance assistants she'd worked with over the years. "I'll be honest with you," Linda said as we wrapped up the tour. "I've had 3 other people look at the business in the past 6 months. 2 of them decided they wanted to start their own studio from scratch rather than take on an existing operation. The 3rd one made a lowball offer and wanted me to finance the entire purchase." She pulled out a folder with financial statements, tax returns, and profit and loss reports. "I'm asking for fair market value. The building alone is worth $280,000 in this neighborhood, and that's not counting 12 years of established business relationships." I took the folder home and spent the next 3 days going through every number. Linda was right. The asking price was fair, maybe even slightly low considering the prime location and established client base. The business was profitable, not just breaking even. The equipment was well maintained and current. The client reviews were consistently excellent. More importantly, I realized I could actually make this work, not just as revenge, but as a legitimate business venture. My graphic design skills would translate well to marketing and client materials. I had an eye for composition and color from years of visual work, and I'd always been good with people when I wasn't dealing with my mother's impossible standards. The financing took some creative maneuvering. I liquidated my investment portfolio, took out a business loan using the building as collateral, and tapped into the emergency fund I'd been building for years. My accountant thought I was insane, but the numbers actually worked. I made Linda an offer on Friday.
$315,000 with $100,000 down, and the remainder financed over 5 years at a competitive interest rate. I also asked if she'd be willing to stay on for 2 months instead of 1 to help me learn not just the business operations, but the more subtle aspects of client management. She called me back on Sunday evening. "I accept your offer, Marcus. When would you like to close?" Hearing my name surprised me. I'd been so focused on presenting myself as a serious buyer that I'd forgotten she knew me from the family session. But her tone was warm, professional, maybe even slightly amused. "As soon as possible," I said. "There is one thing I should mention," Linda continued. "Your family's portraits turned out beautifully. Your mother picked them up last week and seemed very pleased with the results." A cold satisfaction settled in my chest. I'm sure she was. "I have to say, I was sorry you weren't included in the final photos. From a composition standpoint, the portraits would have been much stronger with 5 people instead of 4. "Well," I said, "maybe there will be opportunities for better family portraits in the future." We scheduled the closing for the following Friday. I spent that week preparing, researching photography techniques, watching online tutorials, reading everything I could find about running a portrait studio. I also spent considerable time thinking about what I was really doing.
This wasn't just about revenge, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. This was about creating something of my own, building a business where families could be celebrated for who they were, not rejected for failing to meet some arbitrary standard of respectability. But I'd also be lying if I said I wasn't looking forward to the moment when Mom found out that her embarrassing eldest son now owned the very studio where she'd had him erased from the family portrait. The closing went smoothly. Linda seemed genuinely happy to be passing the business to someone who appreciated what she'd built. As she handed over the keys, she said something that stuck with me. "This place has seen a lot of families over the years, some happy, some complicated, all of them trying to capture something permanent in an impermanent world. I think you'll do well here, Marcus. You understand that families aren't always what they appear to be in photographs." That evening, I stood alone in my new studio, surrounded by equipment I was still learning to use, looking at the walls lined with portraits of other people's families. Tomorrow, Linda would start training me on the technical aspects of the business. Next week, I'd take over the existing bookings. And somehow, I'd figure out how to let my own family know that their portrait session had consequences they never saw coming. Learning to run a photography studio turned out to be like drinking from a fire hose while riding a bicycle, overwhelming, exhausting, and requiring a completely different skill set than I'd anticipated. Linda's 2-month training period became absolutely essential as I discovered just how much I didn't know. The technical side was manageable. I picked up camera settings, lighting ratios, and post-processing workflows relatively quickly. My graphic design background helped with understanding composition and color theory, but the client management side, that was a whole different beast. "Every family has a story," Linda explained during my second week as we reviewed the upcoming booking calendar. "Your job isn't just to take pretty pictures. It's to figure out what story they want to tell and then help them tell it authentically." She pulled up a folder on her computer showing before and after shots from various sessions. "See this family? The Patels. 3 generations, grandmother visiting from India for the first time in 5 years. They wanted formal portraits, but the real magic happened when the grandmother started telling stories to the youngest grandchild. I captured those candid moments between the post shots." Another folder showed a military family. Father just returned from deployment. Everyone was trying so hard to look happy and normal, but you could see the tension. Instead of forcing smiles, I got them doing activities together, playing board games, making dinner. The final portraits showed genuine connection, not performance. I started to understand that Linda's success came from reading people, not just lighting them properly. She could spot family dynamics within minutes of a session starting and adjust her approach accordingly. My first solo session was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, the Morrison family, annual holiday portraits. 2 parents, 3 teenagers, and a golden retriever named Buster. Linda stayed in the background, letting me take the lead, but ready to jump in if needed. The Morrisons were easy clients, relaxed and good-humored. The teenagers made the usual complaints about being dragged to a photo session, but they were cooperative. Buster was more challenging than any of the humans, constantly wandering off to investigate interesting smells around the studio. Just keep shooting, Linda whispered to me during a moment when I'd stopped to adjust a light. Some of the best shots happen between the poses. She was right. The formal portraits came out fine, but the best images were the ones I caught when the youngest daughter was trying to convince Buster to stay in position, or when the parents shared a look of amused exasperation over their kids' antics. The Morrisons loved their proofs. They ordered a large canvas print for their living room and several smaller prints for relatives. Mrs. Morrison even booked a senior portrait session for their oldest daughter on the spot. "You're a natural," Linda told me as we cleaned up after the session. "You have good instincts for reading the room." Over the following weeks, I handled more sessions with Linda's supervision. A baby's first portrait, where patience was more important than technical skill. A corporate headshot session for a law firm, where the challenge was making serious professionals look approachable but authoritative. An anniversary portrait for a couple married 50 years, where the real story was in their comfortable silences and small gestures. Each session taught me something new about families, about the gap between how people see themselves and how they want to be seen. I started to understand why Linda had seemed so tired. This work required emotional intelligence and stamina beyond just artistic ability. But I was also discovering something unexpected. I genuinely enjoyed it. There was something satisfying about helping families capture moments they'd treasure for decades. When I got it right, when I managed to freeze a genuine laugh or a tender glance, the client's reactions made all the technical frustrations worthwhile. Linda's training period was winding down, and I was handling most sessions independently. The studio was running smoothly, bookings were steady, and I'd even started getting referrals from satisfied clients. I was beginning to feel like a legitimate business owner, rather than someone playing dress-up in another person's career. That's when Brittany called. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said without preamble when I answered the phone. "Can you come over tonight?" Her voice had an edge I hadn't heard since the portrait fiasco. I was editing photos from that morning session, a sweet family with twin toddlers who'd spent most of the time trying to escape in opposite directions. But Brittany sounded urgent. "Is everything okay? Is Dad all right?" "Dad's fine. Everyone's fine. Just, can you please come over? It's about wedding planning." I saved my work and drove to Brittany and Derek's apartment, a tidy two-bedroom place in a newer complex on the other side of town. Derek answered the door with an uncomfortable expression that immediately put me on alert. "Hey, Marcus, Brittany's in the kitchen. She's been, well, you'll see." I found my sister sitting at their small dining table, surrounded by wedding magazines, vendor contracts, and what looked like 17 different sample invitation designs. Her laptop was open to a wedding planning website, and her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, taking the chair across from her. Brittany looked up, and I could see the stress written all over her face. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, that slightly manic expression of someone who'd been running on caffeine and anxiety for too long. "Is everything okay? Is Dad all right?" "Dad's fine. Everyone's fine. Just, can you please come over? It's about wedding planning." I saved my work and drove to Brittany and Derek's apartment, a tidy two-bedroom place in a newer complex on the other side of town. Derek answered the door with an uncomfortable expression that immediately put me on alert. "Hey, Marcus, Brittany's in the kitchen. She's been, well, you'll see." I found my sister sitting at their small dining table, surrounded by wedding magazines, vendor contracts, and what looked like 17 different sample invitation designs. Her laptop was open to a wedding planning website, and her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, taking the chair across from her. Brittany looked up, and I could see the stress written all over her face. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, that slightly manic expression of someone who'd been running on caffeine and anxiety for too long. "Mom has completely taken over my wedding," she said without preamble, and I mean completely. She's changed the venue, upgraded the catering package without asking, invited 50 additional people I've never met, and hired a wedding planner who apparently reports directly to her instead of to me.
Derek sat down next to Brittany and took her hand. She's been steamrolling every decision. Yesterday, she told us we needed to change our color scheme because burgundy and gold are too trendy, and we should go with navy and silver instead. But that's not even the worst part, Brittany continued, her voice rising. She's been showing everyone those family portraits from Meadowbrook Studio. Everyone. The mailman, the grocery store clerk, Dad's golf buddies, her book club. She had them blown up and framed for the engagement party invitations. My stomach clenched. Brittany? And every time someone asks about you, she just says you were unable to attend the session, like you were sick or traveling for work or something. She's created this whole narrative where you're just mysteriously absent from family events. The irony was almost too much to handle. Mom was proudly displaying portraits from a studio I now owned, using them to perpetuate a lie about why I wasn't included. "There's more," Derek said quietly. "She wants to use the same photographer for engagement photos, and maybe even some wedding shots. She keeps talking about how professional and accommodating Linda was, how the studio has such beautiful natural light." Brittany leaned forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore. This wedding isn't about me and Derek. It's about Mom's vision of what our family should look like, and that vision apparently doesn't include you." I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Mom wasn't just satisfied with erasing me from one portrait, she was building an entire fiction around my absence, using Linda's beautiful work to support her narrative. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked carefully. "I want you to talk to her. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe we could do new family portraits, ones that include you this time. I could tell her I want updated photos for the wedding, and then we could all go back to that studio together." The suggestion hung in the air like a loaded gun. Brittany had no idea she'd just proposed exactly what I'd been planning, though probably not in the way she was imagining. "Actually," I said slowly, "I think that's a great idea. Why don't you call Mom and tell her you want to schedule another session at Meadowbrook Photography? Tell her you'd like the whole family there this time, that it would mean a lot to you to have everyone included in the wedding photos." "Really? You'd do that? You'd go back there after what happened last time?" "I think it's time we had a proper family portrait session," I said. "One where everyone gets to be exactly who they are." Derek looked relieved. Brittany actually smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Neither of them could have guessed that I was already mentally planning the most satisfying family portrait session in the history of Meadowbrook Photography Studio.
"I'll call her tomorrow," Brittany said. "And Marcus, thank you. I know this isn't easy for you, but it really means everything to me to have my whole family together for this." As I drove home that night, I couldn't help but smile. Mom wanted to show off her perfect family portraits from Linda's studio. Perfect. She was about to get exactly what she asked for. Brittany called me the next evening, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. She said yes, well, sort of. She spent 20 minutes lecturing me about how we already have perfectly good family portraits and why we would need new ones, but then she got excited about the idea of having wedding-quality photos for the reception display. I was in the studio installing new backdrop equipment Linda had recommended before she left for Portland the week before. Her final piece of advice had been simple: trust your instincts and remember that the camera sees everything, even what people try to hide. "What did you tell her exactly?" I asked, adjusting the height on a light stand. "I told her I wanted updated family portraits for the wedding, something more formal that we could use in the reception slideshow and maybe frame for our new house." She got that gleam in her eye, you know the one, where she starts planning something bigger than what you actually asked for. I knew the gleam. It usually preceded Mom reorganizing someone's entire life according to her vision of perfection. "She wants to do it next Saturday at 2 o'clock, same time slot we had before," she said, "since it worked so well last time." Brittany paused. "Marcus, are you sure you're okay with this? I know what happened before was really painful." "I'm looking forward to it," I said, and I meant it. It'll be good to get some proper family photos finally. What I didn't mention was that I'd spent the last 3 days carefully planning every aspect of the session. I'd studied our previous booking file, reviewed the lighting setup Linda had used, and even practiced the poses and groupings. This time, I knew exactly what I was doing. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was probably more prepared for this family portrait session than I'd been for any client session since taking over the studio. But then again, this wasn't really a client session, was it? This was something else entirely. I called Mom on Thursday to confirm the details, adopting my most professional tone. Mrs. Richardson, this is Marcus from Meadowbrook Photography Studio. I'm calling to confirm your family portrait session for Saturday at 2 o'clock. There was a pause. I'm sorry, Marcus. I thought I was speaking with Linda Chen. Miss Chen has retired and moved to Portland to be closer to her family. I'm the new owner of the studio. I'll be your photographer for Saturday's session. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Mom finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. I see. And you are? Marcus Richardson. I took over the business about 6 weeks ago. I let that sink in for a moment. I understand you'd like updated family portraits for your daughter's wedding. I've reviewed your previous session file, and I think we can create something really special for you. Another pause. I could practically hear her calculating, trying to figure out if this was some kind of elaborate joke or cosmic coincidence. You bought Linda's studio? She said finally, her voice flat. I did. It's a beautiful business with an excellent reputation. I'm honored to continue Miss Chen's work serving families in our community. And you expect me to believe this is just coincidence? I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. I expect you to decide whether you want professional family portraits for Brittany's wedding or not, Mrs. Richardson. I have other families I could schedule in that time slot if you'd prefer to find another photographer. The threat worked exactly as I'd hoped. Mom's pride wouldn't let her admit that her own son owning the studio was a problem, especially not when it might disappoint Brittany. The session will proceed as planned, she said crisply. I trust you'll maintain the same professional standards Miss Chen provided. I guarantee it, I said. In fact, I think you'll find I have a very personal investment in making sure this session exceeds your expectations. Saturday morning, I arrived at the studio 2 hours early. I set up multiple lighting configurations, tested different backdrop options, and arranged the furniture in the consultation area exactly how I wanted it. I'd even bought fresh flowers for the reception desk and made sure the coffee machine was stocked with Mom's preferred dark roast, details I remembered from her previous visit. At 1:45, I heard car doors slamming in the parking lot. Through the front windows, I watched my family approach the studio entrance. Mom led the way, dressed in a navy blue dress with pearls that screamed professional family matriarch. Dad followed, in his best suit, looking uncomfortable but resigned. Brittany and Derek brought up the rear, Brittany practically bouncing with nervous energy. I opened the door before they could knock, greeting them with my biggest professional smile. The Richardson family, right on time. Please, come in. Mom stepped inside and immediately began scanning the studio with sharp eyes, looking for any changes since her last visit. The layout was identical, but I'd added some of my own photography work to the display walls, landscapes and architectural shots that showcased technical skill without being too personal. The studio looks exactly the same, she said, her tone suggesting this was somehow disappointing. I believe in preserving what works, I replied smoothly. Miss Chen built something wonderful here. I'm just continuing her legacy. Brittany hugged me quickly while Mom wasn't looking, whispering, "Thank you," in my ear. Derek shook my hand with that slightly bewildered expression he'd worn since learning about my career change. Dad gave me a nod that might have been approval or just acknowledgement. With him, it was always hard to tell. So, Mom said, settling into one of the consultation chairs, like a queen claiming her throne, what's your plan for our session today? I pulled out a leather portfolio filled with sample portraits and layout options. I've prepared several different setups based on your previous session and what I understand about your needs for the wedding. We'll start with some formal groupings, traditional poses that will work well for announcements and reception displays. I opened the portfolio to reveal the first layout, a classic 5-person grouping with parents in the center and children arranged on either side. Mom leaned forward, studying the composition.
Then, I continued, I'd like to capture some more candid moments, natural interactions that show your family's genuine relationships. Those often end up being the photos people treasure most. And you're confident you can deliver the same quality Miss Chen provided? Mom asked, her eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. I'm confident I can deliver exactly what your family needs, Mrs. Richardson. The subtext hung between us like a challenge. She knew I was talking about more than just photography, and I knew she knew, but we were both committed to playing this out. Excellent, she said, standing up and smoothing her dress. Let's begin. I led them into the main shooting area, where I'd prepared a setup similar to their previous session, but with subtle improvements. Better lighting ratios, a more flattering backdrop, furniture arranged to encourage natural positioning rather than stiff poses. Let's start with the classic family grouping, I announced, gesturing toward the arranged chairs and standing positions. The moment of truth. Everyone moved toward their positions, and for just a second, I saw Mom hesitate. She glanced at me, then at the spot where I was supposed to stand, then back at me behind the camera. Actually, she said slowly, perhaps we should start with just the four of us, like last time, and then add Marcus for additional shots. No, Brittany said firmly, surprising everyone, including herself. We're doing this as a complete family, or we're not doing it at all. That was the whole point. Mom's mouth opened, but before she could respond, I stepped smoothly into the gap. Of course, I said, moving from behind the camera to my designated spot. I'll use the timer function for the full family shots, and then we can do some variations with different groupings. It was a photographer's trick Linda had taught me. When families were struggling with dynamics, take control of the situation with professional confidence. Don't give them time to overthink or argue. I set up the camera timer and rushed to my position. The first few shots were awkward, everyone trying too hard to look natural. But as we repeated the process, something interesting happened. Dad started making quiet jokes about my fancy camera skills. Derek relaxed enough to stop looking like he was posing for a mugshot. Brittany's genuine happiness began to shine through. And Mom, despite herself, started getting caught up in the process of creating something beautiful. These are looking wonderful, I announced after reviewing the shots on my camera's display. Now let's try some variations. For the next hour, I guided them through different arrangements and poses, parents alone, siblings together, 3 generations in a line, casual groupings on the couch I'd arranged in one corner. With each setup, the family dynamics shifted and evolved. The real breakthrough came when I suggested they share their favorite family memory while I shot candid photos. Dad started telling a story about a disastrous camping trip from when Brittany and I were kids, when it rained for 3 days straight, then we all had to sleep in the car. Marcus kept insisting he could build a fire in the rain, and Brittany kept trying to catch fish with a stick because she was convinced we were going to starve.
I was 8, Brittany protested, laughing despite herself, and Marcus was being very convincing about the fire situation. I did eventually get that fire started, I pointed out, continuing to shoot as the conversation flowed naturally. Only after you nearly burned down half the forest, Mom said, but she was smiling, actually smiling, at the memory. Those were the shots, the ones where Mom looked at me not as a disappointment or a problem to be managed, but as her son who'd once tried to save the family camping trip with questionable fire-building skills. The ones where all of us were connected by shared history instead of divided by current conflicts. After 2 hours, I called an end to the session. I think we got some really beautiful images today. You should have your proofs ready for review by Wednesday. As we moved back to the consultation area, Mom lingered behind while the others headed for the exit. Marcus, she said quietly, this was professional. Thank you. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was acknowledgement, maybe even a small opening in the wall she'd built between us. I'm glad you're satisfied with the service, I replied formally, but with genuine warmth underneath. She nodded once, then joined the others by the door. As they prepared to leave, Brittany turned back to me. When can we see the photos? I'll have a full gallery ready for you by Wednesday, I promised. I think you're going to love them. After they left, I stood alone in my studio, surrounded by the equipment and backdrops I'd used to photograph my own family. The afternoon sunlight was streaming through those beautiful Victorian windows, illuminating dust motes in the air like tiny golden stars. I'd done it. I'd successfully photographed my family's portrait session, maintained my professionalism, and maybe even started to heal some old wounds. The photos would be beautiful. I could already envision the final edits in my mind. But there was still one more surprise waiting for them in Wednesday's gallery. One final revelation that would complete this strange circle I'd been drawing around my family for the past 3 months. After all, they still didn't know about that automated email I'd received at 2:47 a.m., the one that had started this whole journey, the one that revealed Mom's perfectly curated family portrait had a secret she never intended to share. And Wednesday was the day they'd find out exactly what that secret was. By Tuesday evening, I had finished editing all the photos from Saturday's session. They were spectacular, if I do say so myself. The formal portraits were crisp and elegant, perfect for wedding announcements and reception displays. But the candid shots from the storytelling portion were pure gold, genuine laughter, natural expressions, and that rare quality that separates snapshot from art. I'd also prepared something else, a second gallery that would remain private until I decided otherwise. This one contained the photos I'd discovered through Linda's automated backup system, the ones that had triggered that mysterious 2:47 a.m. email that started this entire journey. See, what Linda hadn't mentioned when she sold me the studio was that her cloud storage system automatically backed up every session, including test shots and outtakes that photographers typically delete. The system was designed as a safety net, preserving images that might seem unimportant at the time, but could become precious later if the main files were corrupted or lost. After my family's original session, the one where Mom had me erased from the final portraits, Linda had continued shooting for several minutes while they rearranged and settled into their new positions. Professional habit, muscle memory, whatever you want to call it. She'd captured transitional moments, shots of people moving between poses, candid expressions when they thought the camera wasn't recording, including several frames where I was still in the background. I'd been gathering my jacket and keys, moving slowly because I was shell-shocked and trying to process what had just happened. Linda's camera had caught me in the edge of several shots, not the focus, but undeniably present. In one particularly striking image, I was visible through the large front windows, sitting in my car in the parking lot, hands on the steering wheel, watching my family pose without me. The metadata told the whole story, timestamps showing exactly when each photo was taken, GPS coordinates confirming the location, even the camera settings Linda had used. An automatic record of the day my mother decided to pretend I didn't exist. When Linda's backup system generated the client gallery 3 months later, it had included everything from that session, not just the carefully curated final selections, but every single frame she'd captured. The automated email had been triggered by a software update that consolidated old backup files, and since I was now the studio owner, all client notifications came to my email address. That's how I'd discovered, at 2:47 a.m. on a random Tuesday, that evidence of my erasure had been preserved in digital amber. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that makes everything look like it's been outlined in black ink. I uploaded Saturday's beautiful new gallery to the client portal and sent the access information to Mom's email address. Professional, efficient, exactly what any satisfied customer would expect. Then I settled in to wait. The call came at 11:23 a.m. "Marcus, these photos are absolutely gorgeous." Brittany's voice was bright with excitement. "You're incredibly talented. I had no idea you could do this kind of work." "Thank you. I'm glad you're happy with them." "Happy? I'm beyond happy. That shot of all of us laughing during Dad's camping story, it's perfect. And the formal portraits are exactly what I need for the wedding. Mom's already talking about ordering a large canvas print for the living room." I smiled, imagining Mom's reaction to seeing herself in a beautiful family portrait that included her previously unrespectable son. "I'm pleased they met your expectations." "They exceeded them by miles. Derek's already asking if you do engagement photos. And Marcus," her voice softened, "thank you for making Saturday so special. I know it couldn't have been easy for you, but having our whole family together meant everything to me. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and navigated to the private gallery I'd prepared. 43 images from that original session, each one time-stamped and geotagged, showing the complete story of what had actually happened that day, including the shots of me being excluded, the transitional moments Linda had captured out of habit, and that haunting image of me sitting alone in the parking lot afterward. I crafted a brief email. Dear Richardson family, I hope you're enjoying your new portrait gallery. While organizing the studio's digital archives, I discovered some additional images from your previous session in March that I thought might be of interest. These photos were preserved in our backup system and show some behind-the-scenes moments from that day. Please find the private gallery link below. Access will remain available indefinitely. Best regards, Marcus Richardson owner, Meadowbrook Photography Studio. I stared at the draft email for 20 minutes before hitting send. Once those photos were out there, there would be no taking them back, no pretending they didn't exist. The evidence would speak for itself. My phone rang 47 minutes later, Brittany's number, but when I answered, it was Mom's voice on the line. Marcus, her tone was carefully neutral, I've seen the additional gallery. I thought the family might be interested in having a complete record of that day. A complete record? She repeated the phrase like she was tasting how it tasted, including photos of you being excluded from the session? Including photos that document exactly what happened, yes. The silence stretched between us. In the background, I could hear voices, Brittany and Derek talking urgently, though I couldn't make out the words. Why? Mom asked finally. Why save those images? Why show them to us now? It was a fair question, and I'd been asking myself the same thing. Why hadn't I just deleted the evidence and moved on? Why force my family to confront what they did? Because, I said slowly, I wanted you to see what that day looked like from the outside, what it looked like to have a family member erased, not just from a photo, but from the story you were telling about who we are. You bought this studio because of what happened. I bought the studio because it was a good business opportunity, but yes, what happened that day influenced my decision. Another pause. When Mom spoke again, her voice was quieter. Those photos, the one of you in the car, shows exactly how it felt to watch my family pose for portraits like I'd never existed. Marcus, and now her voice cracked slightly, I never intended, I didn't realize how it would look. How did you think it would look, Mom? The question hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't backing down, wasn't trying to smooth things over or make her comfortable with her choices. I thought, she started, then stopped. I thought it would be easier, cleaner. I thought we were just postponing the conflict. By pretending I wasn't part of the family? By avoiding a scene in front of the photographer? Instead, you created a scene. You just made sure it was documented. I could hear Brittany's voice getting louder in the background, though I still couldn't make out words. Then Dad's voice joined the conversation, followed by Derek's. It sounded like my private gallery had sparked a family meeting. What do you want from me? Mom asked finally. What do you want me to say? It was the first time she'd ever asked me that question directly. Not what she wanted me to do or how she wanted me to change, but what I actually wanted from her. I want you to understand that your actions have consequences, I said. I want you to acknowledge that excluding me from that portrait wasn't about photography or appearances. It was about control, and it was cruel. It was another long pause. It was wrong. The way I handled it was wrong. The admission hit me like a physical blow. In 32 years, I couldn't remember Mom ever admitting she'd been wrong about anything, especially anything involving me. And I want you to understand, I continued, finding my voice again, that I built something beautiful here. This studio, this business, it's mine. I created it, and I'm good at it. Your son, who was such an embarrassment to the family image, he's now serving the same families you were trying to impress. The irony isn't lost on me, she said dryly.
and I caught just a hint of something that might have been pride in her voice. "Mom?" Brittany's voice came through the phone, apparently having claimed it from Mom. "Are you okay? Dad's been looking at these photos and he hasn't said a word for 10 minutes. "I'm fine," I said, "just having a conversation that's about 3 months overdue." "These pictures," Brittany's voice was thick with emotion. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I knew Mom was being unreasonable, but seeing it like this, seeing you in that car, God, we really hurt you." "Yes," I said simply, "you did. What can we do? How can we fix this?" The question I'd been waiting for, the one that would determine whether Saturday's portrait session was the beginning of healing or just another performance. We can start by being honest about what happened. We can acknowledge that families aren't perfect, and that's okay. We can stop pretending that respectability matters more than actual respect. And we can display both sets of portraits at the wedding, the new ones and some of these older ones. Show the whole story, not just the pretty parts. Mom's voice came back on the line. "Brittany, that's not necessary." "It is necessary," Brittany interrupted, her voice firm in a way I'd rarely heard before. "It's necessary because we're about to become a bigger family, and Derek needs to understand who we really are, not just who we pretend to be in photographs." Derek's voice joined the conversation, apparently on speakerphone now. "For what it's worth, the photos from Saturday are incredible. But these older ones, they tell an important story too. About forgiveness, about growing, about family being complicated. About accountability," I added. "Yes," Mom said quietly. "About accountability." We talked for another 20 minutes, working out details for the wedding reception display, discussing which photos to include and how to present them. It felt strange, planning an exhibit of our family's dysfunction and recovery, but also right somehow. As we were wrapping up the call, Dad's voice came through for the first time. "Marcus? Son?" "Yeah, Dad. I'm proud of you. For the business, for the photos, for standing up for yourself. I should have said something that day, should have backed you up. I didn't, and I'm sorry." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Dad's apology meant more than I'd realized it would. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." After we hung up, I sat in my studio surrounded by the tools of my new trade, thinking about the strange path that had brought me here. The family portraits on the walls seemed to glow in the afternoon light. Other people's stories of love and conflict, celebration and compromise. Tomorrow, I had 3 client sessions scheduled: a newborn shoot in the morning, corporate headshots in the afternoon, and a golden anniversary portrait in the evening. Each one a chance to help families capture who they really were, not just who they thought they should be. But first, I had one more gallery to create, a special wedding collection featuring both Saturday's beautiful new portraits and carefully selected images from that painful March session. A visual story of how families can break apart and come back together, how conflict can lead to understanding, how even the worst moments can become part of a larger story about love and growth. After all, that's what family portraits are really about. Not perfection, but truth. And sometimes the truth is more beautiful than any pose you could ever arrange. The wedding reception was held at Riverside Gardens, a converted barn venue with string lights draped between exposed beams and mason jar centerpieces that screamed Pinterest perfect. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't the carefully curated rustic chic aesthetic. It was the photo display I'd spent 3 days setting up near the entrance. I'd created what I called the Family Story Wall, a chronological journey through portraits spanning 3 generations. Brittany's grandparents' formal 1960s wedding portrait, Mom and Dad's engagement photo from 1987, school pictures, holiday cards, vacation snapshots. And then, prominently featured in the center, both sets of family portraits from Meadowbrook Photography Studio. The beautiful new portraits from our October session were displayed in elegant silver frames, showing the Richardson family at their best. Genuine smiles, natural poses, everyone included and celebrated. But right next to them, in identical frames, were carefully selected images from the March session. Not the harsh exclusion shots, but the transitional moments that told a story of family complexity and growth.
I'd chosen one particular image as the centerpiece, a split-screen composition I'd created in post-production. On the left, the formal march portrait with 4 figures arranged in perfect symmetry. On the right, that same pose from October with 5 people, the composition more dynamic and alive. The caption read, "Family, a work in progress." The reactions throughout the evening were everything I'd hoped for and more. Derek's parents, the conservative traditionalists Mom had been so worried about impressing, spent 20 minutes studying the display. His mother, a soft-spoken woman named Carol, found me during the cocktail hour. "Your family's photo story is remarkable," she said, gesturing toward the wall. "It takes courage to show the difficult moments alongside the beautiful ones." "Thank you. We wanted to be honest about who we are." "Derek told us about your studio, about how this all came full circle. It's quite a story." She paused, sipping her wine. "You know, our family went through something similar with our oldest son. Different circumstances, but the same kind of exclusion. It took us years to find our way back to each other." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of Derek's family from last Christmas. "This was our first complete family portrait in 5 years. Sometimes the most meaningful pictures are the ones that represent healing, not just happiness." Throughout the evening, other guests approached me with their own stories. Family rifts over career choices, political differences, lifestyle decisions. The photo wall had somehow given people permission to acknowledge that families are complicated, that love doesn't always look perfect in pictures. But the most important reaction came from an unexpected source. I was adjusting one of the spotlights illuminating the display when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "It's quite an installation." I turned to find Linda Chen, elegant in a navy dress with a small corsage pinned to her lapel. Brittany had invited her as a surprise, flying her back from Portland for the weekend. "Linda, I had no idea you were coming. Your sister contacted me last week. She said the family wanted to thank the photographer who'd helped bring you all back together." Linda smiled, studying the wall with professional appreciation. "Though I think we both know the real photographer responsible for this story is standing right here." We stood together, watching guests examine the portraits and read the story cards I'd placed next to each grouping. "You've done something special here, Marcus. Not just with the business, I knew you'd succeed at that. But this," she gestured toward the wall, "this is using photography the way it's meant to be used, to tell the truth, not just capture beauty. I learned from an excellent teacher." "No," Linda said firmly. "What you did here, what you built from that painful experience, that came from you. I just provided the technical foundation." As the evening progressed, I found myself moving through the reception like a documentary photographer, capturing candid moments of celebration. Brittany and Derek's first dance, backlit by those string lights. Dad taught Derek's nephew how to tie his shoe when the 4-year-old's laces came undone. Mom laughed at something Derek's father whispered in her ear during dinner. But the moment that will stay with me forever happened during the father-daughter dance. Dad and Brittany were swaying to some classic rock ballad when Dad gestured for me to join them. Not for a photo, just to be part of the moment. Mom saw what was happening and walked over, followed by Derek. Soon, half the wedding party was on the dance floor in an impromptu group celebration. As the song ended, Mom found herself standing next to me. The DJ immediately started another slow song, and before I could process what was happening, she extended her hand. "Dance with your mother?" It was the first time she'd initiated physical affection with me in years. We moved awkwardly at first, both of us out of practice with this kind of vulnerability. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you acknowledgement of what you've accomplished." "Mom, no, let me say this. What you did, buying the studio, building a business, creating something meaningful from such a painful experience, that took strength I didn't know you had. That took vision I was too proud to see." The music swirled around us, other couples dancing nearby, but it felt like we were alone in our own bubble of honesty. I spent so long trying to control how our family looked to other people that I forgot to pay attention to how we actually treated each other. That photo wall over there, it tells the real story. Not just the pretty ending, but the messy middle, where we had to figure out how to love each other despite our differences. We're still figuring it out, I said. Yes, but now we're doing it together, as a complete family. The song ended, but we stayed in our embrace for a moment longer. When we pulled apart, I saw tears in Mom's eyes, not of sadness, but of something that looked like relief. Later, during the reception's final hour, I was packing up my camera equipment when Brittany approached with a manila envelope. What's this? Wedding gift. Well, business gift, really. She was practically vibrating with excitement. Open it. Inside were signed contracts and booking forms. 6 families, all friends of Brittany and Derek, all requesting portrait sessions at Meadowbrook Photography Studio. I may have spent the entire reception talking up my incredibly talented photographer brother, she said, grinning. Turns out, when you tell people about a photography studio where families can be themselves, complicated, imperfect, real, they get very interested. Brittany, your wedding present to me was giving us back our family. This is my wedding present to you, helping your business grow. As the evening wound down and guests began heading home, I found myself alone with the photo wall one final time. The images looked different now, somehow, less like evidence of conflict and more like documentation of growth. The painful March portraits weren't about exclusion anymore. They were about the journey we'd taken to get to October's inclusion. I was taking down the last few frames when Dad appeared beside me. Need help packing up? Sure, thanks. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, carefully wrapping the framed portraits in tissue paper. Marcus, Dad said finally, I've been thinking about what you said on the phone last week, about accountability. Yeah? I failed you that day at the studio. I should have stood up to your mother, should have insisted you be included. I let my discomfort with conflict override my responsibility as your father. I stopped packing and looked at him directly. Dad, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying I understand now what my silence cost you, and I'm committed to making sure it doesn't happen again. It means everything to hear you say that. Good, because I have something else to tell you. He pulled out his phone and showed me his lock screen, a photo from Saturday's session, the one where we were all laughing at his camping story. This has been my wallpaper since Wednesday. Every time someone asks about my family, I get to show them this picture and tell them about my son who owns his own photography studio. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. After years of feeling like a disappointment, I was finally hearing what I'd always wanted, my father's genuine admiration for who I'd become. 6 months later, Meadowbrook Photography Studio had a waiting list 3 months long. Word had spread about the photographer who specialized in real family portraits, sessions where tattoos weren't hidden, where complicated dynamics were acknowledged, where the goal was authenticity rather than perfection. I'd also started offering something I called family story sessions, extended portraits that documented families' complete narratives, including the difficult chapters. They were becoming increasingly popular with families going through transitions, reconciliations, or major life changes. The studio walls now featured some of my favorite client work, along with my own family's journey. Visitors often commented on the honesty of the displays, the way they showed families as they really were, rather than as they thought they should be. But my favorite addition to the studio was a small plaque Linda had sent from Portland, mounted next to the front door. It read, "Every family has a story. Our job is to help them tell it truthfully." As I locked up the studio each evening, I'd pause to read those words and think about the strange path that had brought me here. Getting excluded from one family portrait had led to owning the studio, building a business, and ultimately healing relationships I'd thought were beyond repair. The best family portraits, I'd learned, aren't the ones where everyone looks perfect. They're the ones where everyone looks real, where love is visible despite the complications, where acceptance exists alongside the differences, where the story being told is honest enough to last for generations. And sometimes, the most beautiful portrait of all is the one that captures a family's ability to grow, to change, to find their way back to each other, even after everything seems broken. That's the story I'm in the business of telling now.
one honest portrait at a time. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.